You know, there's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. They just say it. Affordability. I inherited the worst inflation in history. There was no affordability. Nobody could afford anything. The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats. They say affordable. I watched the other day where some very low IQ congresswoman talked about affordability. She had no idea. Their prices were much higher.
Are the American people, do you believe, getting impatient with the reforms that you're making? They've talked about it's about.
I think they're getting fake news from guys like you. Look, affordability is a hoax that was started by Democrats who caused the problem of pricing.
All right, so if we all heard that correctly, President Trump just said that affordability doesn't mean anything to anybody and that it's a con job by the Democrats. I feel like I don't even need to say anything about that, but I will. Affordability seems like a pretty clear word to me, but just in case President Trump is watching this, it's the ability for people to afford food, housing, healthcare, childcare costs, some pretty important things. And he's calling that a con job. He keeps saying that prices have come down, so we don't need to talk about affordability anymore. But has anyone actually experienced that? Does anyone go to the grocery store and see lower costs than a year ago or 2 years ago? Because I certainly have not. And of course, in true Trump fashion, he's also blaming Biden in the same breath. Has Trump not been president for a full year? Does he not also have a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate? At what point in Trump's entirely Republican-driven presidency does this not become his economy and his responsibility? But sure, let's keep blaming the guy who hasn't been in office for 12 full months. I'm sure that'll help pay people's bills. But here's the thing. Trump did believe in the affordability crisis at one point. If you drink, pour yourself a glass. We're about to play you some clips. Why don't you take a sip every time he says affordability?
This is the first part of my plan to restore housing affordability in America. And this is an affordability crisis. We will target everything from car affordability to housing affordability to insurance costs to supply chain issues. Under my leadership, we will throw out Bidenomics and we will replace it very simply with Maganomics.
I mean, this is Maganomics. Maganomics means a higher cost of living, higher cost at the grocery store, higher cost when you drop your kid off at daycare. So which is it? I mean, is affordability a hoax, or was it that Trump made affordability the center of his campaign, but then as soon as he took office, it all of a sudden became a hoax? The flip-flopping is probably because he spent the entire last year of his presidency helping out himself and his billionaire friends. That's why when he's questioned about affordability, he acts like he's never even heard of it, doesn't even know what this crisis is. Because from day one in office, his priority was his ultra-wealthy friends, not you. And people are hurting so badly that even Fox News aired polling showing how poorly Americans feel about the economy under Trump.
Personal financial situation now, excellent, good, 40%, only fair or poor, 60%. You can see that changing from July. Condition of the U.S. economy, also a perception totally upside down, 76 to 25, and that changing a bit. And then economic conditions for the nation and you personally, again, 25% positive, 76 negative for the nation, and then 60-40 personally.
So now you've got people close to Trump worried that he might be out of touch. I mean, wonder why, right? Americans voted for him because he talked about affordability. He promised to fix their grocery bills, their rent, their daily struggles. And now what exactly is he doing? He's building a gilded ballroom at the White House. He spent $30 million of taxpayer dollars on a birthday parade for himself. He's sending $40 billion of, again, your taxpayer money to Argentina to help out one of his friends. Can you imagine what all of those millions of dollars could do if we focus that money on helping us, normal, everyday Americans, instead of Trump's billionaire friends? But instead, Trump takes the taxes you pay and spends it on himself and his friends. But whether or not Trump thinks affordability is real, how people feel about Trump is very real.
Just take a look here. This is Gallup. This is the longest running poll. You know, Gallup has been conducting polls since my father was a kid, and my father was born in 1927, had me in his 60s. Look at this. In January, Donald Trump's net approval rating, not too bad, not too great. It was at -1 point, right within the margin of error, breaking even. But look at this now. Negative 24 points, way, way down. We're talking about a drop of over 20 points in the wrong direction for the President of the United States. Minus 24 points, that's a 23-point move in the incorrect direction if you're the president. And of course, what's so important here, Sarah Seidner, is it matches the trend that we've seen with other polls, that is Donald Trump hitting his low for the second term. I was doing the count last night. I think we're up to 10 polls in sort of the last 40 days, 10 different pollsters who have said that Trump is at the lowest point he is in his second term.
So how does this compare to other presidents in their second term at this point in time?
Yeah, okay. So, this is one of these great examples where I kind of run out of room on the slide.
You sure did.
Yeah, I run out of room on the slide, so I just put up the Republican presidents. But look, the only one who's worse for me, either among Republicans or Democrats at this point in his second term, is Richard Nixon. And of course, Richard Nixon had to wave adios amigos goodbye less than a year after this poll was taken.
And how people feel about Trump is pretty terrible. No other Republican president has had polling numbers this low at this point in their term, except for Richard Nixon. I mean, what a guy to model yourself after. So while Trump doesn't feel the struggles of living paycheck to paycheck while he's eating gold-plated steaks at the country club and claiming affordability is fake, his popularity is very real to him. And more importantly, it's very real to other Republicans. Trump's approval rating is tanking. Voters are turning on him. And suddenly, Republicans in Congress are starting to get nervous.
Trump, I think, is still the leader of the party, but it seems like more and more Republicans in Congress are willing to break with Trump, at least on certain issues.
Yeah, good morning, guys. It definitely seems like as the president's first year back in office winds down, the honeymoon period seems to be winding down as well with the Republican Party, at least, and potentially the American people, as you guys pointed to those polling results. But there's been sort of a litany of issues in the last few weeks, especially where we've seen more and more Republicans willing to break with the president, express frustration with how the president is approaching certain issues, or just straight up reject some of what the president is proposing. When you look at things like this idea for a tariff dividend check, we've seen a number of congressional Republicans say that they don't support that idea. They'd rather see it used to pay down the debt. We've seen breaks with the president with his handling of the conflict in Ukraine, or how the administration's building up forces near Venezuela. We've seen pushback when it comes to Trump's calls to end the filibuster, when it comes to calls for redistricting, when it comes to AI policy. So there's really been sort of a bevy of issues where Republicans have sort of dug in a bit more and seemingly kind of pushed back on where the administration is headed on some of these things.
So I think this is pretty interesting. Republicans are breaking with Trump and disagreeing with him publicly. They're pushing back on his policies. Let's be clear on why that is. It's not because they suddenly grew a conscience, and it's definitely not because a full 12 months into Trump's term, they suddenly started caring about the American people. It's because Trump's popularity has tanked so badly that being associated with him right now might actually be bad for them. Republicans don't care about you. They don't care about the cost of living or your grocery bill or whether you can make rent. What they care about is winning their next election. And right now, Trump is becoming a liability rather than an asset.
Democrats now hold the largest advantage over Republicans when it comes to congressional party favorability. For the first time that wide, at least, in many years. The new Marist poll showing off a majority of voters say they would rather elect a Democrat than a Republican if the midterms were held today.
Donald Trump is not going to face voters again. Republicans are freaking out because they saw the results in New Jersey and Virginia. They're looking at these numbers and they see the bottom dropping out for them next year, and they don't like it.
Trump only cares about polling numbers because of his ego. He can't stand that people don't like him, and he can't handle that his approval is in the toilet. So he does what he always does. He declares the problem fake. Affordability is a hoax. According to Trump, if people can't afford groceries, that's their problem, not Trump's. If your rent is eating up 60% of your paycheck, you're just falling for Democratic propaganda. If you can't afford your prescription medications, that's definitely not the fault of the president, who's been in office for a full year with a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Meanwhile, Republicans in Congress are worried about their seats, and more importantly, their ultra-wealthy donors who benefit when Republicans are in office. Republicans saw last month's elections where Democrats won huge victories, and now they're panicking. Because here's what Trump refuses to admit. Republicans aren't giving people what they want. They have no plan to lower the cost of living. They have no plan to lower healthcare costs. They have no plan for anything except tax cuts for the wealthy. Meanwhile, Democrats are offering people real solutions, real policies to lower the cost of living, to lower healthcare costs and lower the cost of prescription drugs, to lower childcare costs, to build more affordable housing, to lower your rent or help buy you a home. And Republicans are terrified because they know they're on the wrong side of this fight. They know that when people are choosing between affordability is fake and here's our plan to help you actually afford groceries, they're gonna lose. Affordability is a hoax. Tell that to the single mom who's been working 2 jobs and still can't afford daycare. Tell that to the young couple who's given up on ever buying a home. Tell that to the senior citizens who are rationing their medications because they can't afford their prescriptions. Tell that to the millions of American families who went to the store to pick up groceries for Thanksgiving and saw their receipts come out more expensive than they've ever been. To recap, Trump ran on fixing affordability, to lower your cost of living, then proceeded to make everything worse, and now claims that the affordability crisis isn't even real. And Republicans, they backed him until his polling tanked, and now they're scrambling to distance themselves without actually doing anything to make the situation better. They're not doing anything to make your life better. And the only people offering real solutions are Democrats, while Republicans continue to blame literally anyone but themselves. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and share this with anyone who needs to hear it, especially any of your friends who may have voted for Trump. And remember who actually cares about you and your family, because it is definitely not Trump.